Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Lichter, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project for the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I am a member of the Kenosha History Center and have volunteered there since 2015. We hope that you will enjoy these programs. I'm with Dr. Dorian Gray, Kenosha media personality. Hello and welcome.
Hello, great to be here.
What type of work do you do, Doctor?
Well, I'm unemployed at the moment because just before you contacted me, my boss said your history.
Definitely. Okay, how did you get started in media in general?
Well, it was a long road. I guess it was just being influenced by the Universal horror films as a kid, discovering Creature Feature out of WGN. Channel 9, which basically showed all the Universal classics. The original Frankenstein, Bela Lugosi was a huge influence, and I always thought my father and some of my uncles looked like Bela Lugosi, so those were just fantastic things and a great presentation of great stories, literature, great actors, and the huge sets and just the whole fun of that. And then later on, the Universal films in the later period, all the sequels and everything were just a blast for a kid.
Okay. And that led you to your own program hosting?
Well, it did. It set the course because I really wanted to create my own horror character and run a haunted house, and then it got me into art because I was so I guess I was so artistically charged from those films that I started drawing the monsters and trying to do my own little comic book strips and everything. And then there was it was a real revelation of a day for me, is that I had a Frankenstein poster in my bedroom. And in the poster, Korolov's head's just tilted a little bit, so it's not really a profile, but you could really exaggerate that line in the brow. And I thought, if I draw my line like that brow looks, it's probably going to look a lot more like Frankenstein. And so my artwork kind of advanced at that period much sooner. So I got into art and drawing, and and then you think you're really good at something, and then you go to another school and meet a kid that blows you away. It's a good thing though, because then you're challenged. You're too comfortable with anything like that. You take it for granted. So I met an artist named John Stadema that probably could have worked for Marvel when he was in 9th grade. He was that good, and well, that made me try harder. That's a good thing. And so it kind of started with the art, the horror movies, and then in the music scene when I was like 18 and 19, and seeing band like the Cramps, who's like the real horror rockabilly kind of a band. The lead singer kind of looks like a cross between Elvis Presley and Vincent Price, so they're very wild and just that cool sound. It had that Creature Feature sound. If you remember the old Creature Feature,
yes.
Someone was a genius at WGM, because what they did was they took footage from the Universal horror films and used Henry Mancini's Experiment in Terror soundtrack from the movie with the same title, and that has sort of this creepy guitar sound, and a lot of people don't even know that that's actually a Henry Mancini. Wow. And from what I understand, it was WGN's version of Creature Feature, because there was Creature Feature shows all over the country. Most of them had a horror host. And these kind of shows developed when they started releasing the Universal horror movies to television. They thought something like Dracula or Frankenstein was going to be a little bit too scary for television, so we'll put a cheesy host on and add a little comic relief to the sheer horror that the Universal films are. I think they're more fantasy films myself than what's become the horror movie in modern times.
Okay. Are you originally from Kenosha?
Absolutely. Born and raised in Kenosha.
Okay. What was it like growing up in your time?
It was pretty good. A lot of fish fries with the grandparents at the various pubs around town. And, nothing negative there. I mean, that was a thing. You go out to the pubs with, for fish fry with the grandparents and my parents and my grandparents. Great memories. Good tour of a lot of Kenosha pubs at a young age. I think I learned a lot from that, really. It was never a bad experience, that's for sure.
And you had your own music groups, bands, correct too?
Oh yeah, I've been solid with that. That's been consistent since I was a teenager. I started that, and I've never really gave up on it.
What's a typical day of work like for you?
Well, I don't know. I try to stay away from the W word
That
as
word.
much as I can. But it's just sort of, it can be very random. Whether it's painting, art, doing something for a set for the TV show, music, it all depends. If you're in a band, when's everybody got time to get together, So, you never know. Someone might call you up and say, well, we can practice today. Okay, well, I was going to work on a painting or something else or sculpture, do something for a client,
Because you're very well known locally and even farther reaching for your Crimson Theater radio shows that you do. The Jerry Smith famous haunted house, haunted bus.
Yeah.
And your music and the Dorian Gray art show. What is that all about?
Dorian Gray Art Show is basically it started out in a time when there wasn't a venue for artists that did the horror theme. A lot of them are scoffed at by the gallery artists, and shunned upon. Now that's changed now. That's changed immensely. But a lot of these guys that in the comic book, graphic novel industry, or the painters that did the covers for famous monsters, for instance, or artists like Frank Frazetta or Jack Kirby, they will paint these gallery artists under the table in a heartbeat. So there was a lot of, I guess it was sort of a little bit of a discrimination, but so I based that on the picture of Dorian Gray 1945 film. Ivan Albright created that fantastic decrepit painting of Dorian Gray, which is at the Art Institute in Chicago. You really should check it out, and the movie if you haven't seen it. It was a slower moving horror film. As a kid, I probably wouldn't have been interested in, but later as an adult, I found it to be quite inspiring.
Excellent. In your general operation, do you have a staff?
Oh, the only staff I have all the fine folks at Kenosha Community Media that have helped me through the years with the television. Jason Rimkus, Ralph Piro, the gorilla that directs the show. I mean, until you've had a guy direct your TV show in a gorilla suit, you really haven't arrived in television.
Sounds good. In your the Crimson Theater part of it, were you on the air in other cities too besides Kenosha?
Well, the show's gotten all kinds of. It was on in Milwaukee for a long time until their access station closed down. Of course, in Kenosha here, we're approaching the 21-year mark, and it's on in Chicago over-the-air television on a station called VPod TV, and so it's gotten out. And then there actually was there was a gentleman. He passed now, but for a good long time, he said, "Can I send you some shows?" And I'm like, "Oh, sure I can." And he didn't really know about me, and I, those big cones of CDs, I just sent him like 100 shows, and he freaked out.
And throughout your time, 21 years being involved in this type of media, have you developed relationships and friendships with similar hosts around the country?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of cool ones. Like any entertainment, if you're an artist, an entertainer, actor, musician, you're gonna get drama. So it's not always. I don't know that some of them have done different degrees of how they portray their shows, or whether they have an artistic background or any experience in television to begin with, or doing shows. But it's a good group actually, and it's very popular.
What were some of the early hosts? Maybe that influenced you in a way?
It would definitely be Dr. Cadaverino and Jerry G. Bishop, the original Sven Gulli. Dr. Cadaverino, of course, was Jack DeBlanc, who also was a puppeteer at Channel 6. And he had a character, Albert the Alley Cat, that did the weather with the weatherman on Channel 6. And that weatherman couldn't get in the Weatherman's Association, I heard, because he did the weather with a puppet.
Wow. What about your audience in general? How would you describe your audience?
Well, a lot of them are big nostalgia fans. They're people that there's people that grew up watching those other horror hosts that love that sort of thing and loved it when I went on the air. And now there's a lot of kids that say they grew up with me as their first host, and they watched the show for years, and they'll come around and be like 35 years old and said, "I watched you since I was 5." I'm like, "How's that possible?" Maybe not 35.
All right. How about, since in 20 years, I mean, technology's changed so much. How did that affect, or how did the change in filming your show and recording your show change in that time, technology-wise?
Well, usually, Ralph Pirro and the staff at Kenosha Community Media are responsible for the filming and the technical side, so I really didn't see much changes in that, with the exception of when you were on cable back in 2001 to 2010, people didn't have other providers back then, so it was like being on over-the-air commercial television. And then with all the different media platforms and Facebook and the internet and all this other stuff, YouTube came up, and they weren't the only provider anymore. So, you used to go to the grocery store and someone would say, I saw the movie, and talk about whatever antics I did on the show, and they'd talk about it, and now it's kind of more like, oh, are you still doing this show? Because they don't have the same cable provider. So that's a little disconcerting.
And was there a time, I mean, the 2020 COVID pandemic affected a lot of people, a lot of work, a lot of industries. What did that do to your operation?
Well, it shut down Kenosha Community Media. It ruined the band. I mean, it just ruined all the entertainment business. Seemed targeted at the entertainment business a little bit. Yeah, that was kind of tough. You didn't really know what was going on initially. It seemed like something out of a science fiction movie. And, well, that's a big argument there, what really went on. So.
Okay, what's the best part of your job? What do you enjoy most about?
Well, I enjoy most of it. It's not a job. It's something that I want to do. I do it because I want to. I do it for the fans or the people that come to Jerry Smith's. Jerry Smith's is a very magical place to me. The Smith family is some of the most genuine, kind, and nice and generous people you'll ever meet. And it's been great to have the 30 years being involved with that. And so I wouldn't want to be anywhere else for the October season. You're outside at a pumpkin farm. Yeah, it's great. And as you mentioned staff earlier, my haunters are probably what closest thing to a staff that I would have. And haunters are an interesting variety of people because they're not really interested in setup or doing any kind of labor or anything. They just want to be haunters. So if they're there and there's not a good crowd, they're not as happy as when it's busy because they love it like I do. So I've been very fortunate to have, the Sanders brothers and, Johnny Benna, a lot of, they've been with me for years.
Okay. What is that facility like out at Jerry Smith's Pumpkin Farm?
Well, it's expanded a lot, okay. Joe Smith, the son of Jerry, he took it over, and he liked the idea of making everything bigger and better. And I think he's really he enjoys it. That's for sure. It's not. You could tell that Joe and Amy enjoy doing what they do out there. So as I do, and it's just gone, expanded a lot further. Mind you, though, even though Joe took over and owns the pumpkin farm, good old Jerry Smith is still out there on the tractor. I think he's like 180 now, but.
Good. What about you're involved? Of course, we talked about Crimson Theater. What about some radio work that you've done?
Well, I got into radio. I was on a different program called The Mothership with Dobie Maxwell, and he brought me on as a sidekick kind of a character. That's how I started doing it. And we were on the UFO subject, aliens, and all that sort of thing. And I just wanted to do my own show that focused more on movies and horror characters and everything. So I kind of branched off there, and later I got sucked back into doing the cryptid UFO conspiracy theory stuff, which is we're in a whole different realm. While we do have a lot of Mothman sightings, Bigfoot or the Beast of Bray Road, the werewolf legend, which I hear more and more stories about, or people that see UFOs. We're a little bit different era now than Art Bell, though, because what's happening with AI and AI intelligence, and computers and robots and things like that, is being flat out. They're putting this right out there that this is what's going on, and it's a very scary subject, really, and it has a lot of could be a lot of odious things that might come out of it. We've just. Recently, I just read an article about a guy who wants to plan to depopulate the Earth, that we have to have less people being born to save the planet.
Ooh.
So there's a lot of crazy stuff out there that I think deserves more focus than UFOs, even though now the Pentagon has admitted that they're seeing things that they don't know what they are. We're going back to the moon, which there's a lot of theories even on the moon, that the moon's hollow and full of aliens. And, you know, and then people doubt the original moon landing. That's another big thing. For me personally, I find it hard to believe that we went there and then just stopped. That doesn't seem right at all, but I don't know. But that's where that sort of program on the radio goes. And, you know, you have to just take it verbatim for what people say. And if they can tell a good story, they got time. If, you know, you get to see a lot of crackpots too, though. And then, so, well, sorry, thanks for calling.
So now here we are in 2022. And the genre of the horror film host and the Saturday night type of theater like that has been really around for 50 years or more than that.
I think the late 50s, mid 50s was the first one. Murder Before Midnight in Chicago might have been the first show with the Swami that they had. And Marvin was in Chicago, who had a big budget, kind of a cross between Peter Lorre and a Beatnik character. And that was on in the 50s in Chicago, which is, you know, he deserves more recognition than he gets from the Chicago audience. They don't seem to know that much about him. And actually, in my generation too, you know, we grew up on almost 60s television, which really went into syndication. Now, once I got on this VPAD TV in Chicago, well, wouldn't you know, there's a whole bunch of cool shows, TV shows from the 50s that I never heard of in my life. A different version of Dragnet, for instance. And these shows are all great. What is it, a show called The Buccaneer with Robert Shaw as sort of a pirate character? No wonder he got the role in Jaws. You know, I didn't even know who Robert Shaw was until I saw Jaws when I was a kid. So there's all these television shows from the 50s, like I said, they're actually really good, but they never got, you know, put in a rerun as much as the Addams Family Monsters or Bewitched or, you know, that kind of a story, you know, show.
What about those great, like, One Step Beyond, Twilight Zone?
Well, yeah, they always wanted to freak people out. The Outer Limits, really, too. It was another one. Just it got really heavy with that. I guess the public's fascination with the unknown and you know, aliens and science fiction. They got a huge appetite for that. And again, I just think it's an entirely entertaining medium, and that's why it's successful.
What do you see in the future, 10, 20, 30 years from now? There's still a nostalgia, or maybe who knows what's going to happen?
Well, a lot of people think they know what's going to happen, and where horror hosting is concerned, there was host that, well, I don't know if he was actually really did much. He's kind of a cantankerous, grumpy old host that said, no horror host will ever be on over-the-air television ever again. That's been proven wrong by several hosts now, because all these smaller television stations sprung up, you know, doing over-the-air thing. So that was wrong. And they also said, well, you know, you're not, you know, when you think back, you're not going to think about you're watching a horror show. You're going to think about watching it being on broadcast television on your television set, you know. And I don't agree with that. I think that kids today are going to watch on whatever modern TV or you know, computer screen, however they watch it. It doesn't matter, because it's still the same thing. You're watching a television show. So I think they will still have the nostalgia for that. I think it is something that's going to go beyond in the generations. Technology, though, is moving quick. So, you know, if you're listening to me talk right now about something that might be going on 100 years from now, I probably have no idea what's coming there. Okay. I hope you're still watching horror hosts. Right. And I hope mankind evolves to a better state than it's at in 2022.
And the whole idea of watching TV is so much different now, where you don't have to be home by 7 o'clock to watch your favorite show. I mean, everything is on YouTube or on demand.
Right. Well, yeah, right.
Just like your.
I mean, there is you know, our show still comes on at a certain time. We put it on YouTube and whatnot. But I think you know, people like to see stuff that's broadcast. You know, I can watch an entire movie on my phone, okay, and when I think about the movie in my head, I don't even think about it being on the phone. I just remember the movie. So how you watch it isn't important. The technology and how you watch it isn't as important as the film or television show itself.
Okay. You've been noted. I know there was a Milwaukee Magazine interview that you
Milwaukee Magazine interview 2021 fall, which led to a horror host documentary about Kenosha horror hosts. It's called I'm Your Host, and that's supposed to come out, I believe, spring 2023. And this is really cool. People from Milwaukee made a film about horror hosts in Kenosha, which we've had a whole lot of them that have come along. Either they were on my show or not, or were inspired, or they're all connected. It's all connected somehow. So that's really cool that they did that. And I was just informed that they just recently, to help with the film, they won an award in Milwaukee for, I think, $5,000 to help produce this documentary. Wow. So whoever gave them the financing must have thought that the subject was worthy, which is an incredible thing for hosts in Kenosha and Kenosha itself.
So other hosts, Dr. Destruction acted as a mentor for other hosts?
I think all hosts do. Everybody copies from somewhere. Okay. I copy from, different guitar players to different artists. When I was in art school, my professor always said, just steal from everybody.
Wow. And you, I believe you were inducted into Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that was the Worldwide Television and Radio Horror Host Hall of Fame, which I'm surprised they made an award that involved both television and radio. I don't know how many people really do that. There's a lot of hosts that are doing, blog talk radio or whatnot, but I found my way into the cast of at WLIP. John Perry, the program director, I think he really wanted this kind of show on the air. But it's incredibly popular, and we get a lot of calls and a lot of feedback from the radio show, probably more than anything else.
Excellent. Do you have a favorite horror film?
Well, I get that question a lot, and really, basically, it's I'm more for favorite bodies of work. So all the Universal horror films, the Hammer films that were done in Britain, the Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe collaborations with Roger Corman that came out in the 60s, a body of work again. All the Japanese monster movies are a body of work. Tim Burton's movies are a body of work, and Rob Zombie's as well. So that's the way I like to look at that. I guess real no favorites, but I like the entire genre. Probably, The Bride of Frankenstein, Picture of Dorian Gray, original Godzilla. I mean, those are all great. And Godzilla's really amazingly popular. And you grew up watching these movies as a kid, whether it's the Munsters or Godzilla. Never even gave it a thought that 100 million years later, I'd still be talking about those characters. And they're immensely popular to this day. There's horror conventions, anime. I mean, it's just, people got to get, they got to step away from their jobs of reality. And these are fantasy films and whatnot, and takes your mind off of, more complicated problems. I think the movie, definitely some body of works that big thumbs down. The Halloween films, I like the Rob Zombie ones, but the Halloween films, once they brought the slasher serial killer element of reality into the horror genre and Halloween, no, I didn't like that. I do like the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, but only because at points they're Rob Zombie movies that then have to end up becoming a Halloween movie, and that's where they kind of lose me.
Okay. Were you ever involved politically in Kenosha?
Well, I ran for mayor in 2004. That kind of threw me into a first name basis with a lot of politicians and whatnot, and I ran against John Anaramian. And it started out as a goof on the show that I was going to run for mayor, and then it came to election time, and I just pursued it thinking that at some point they're going to say, get out of here, and submitted my nomination papers in full regalia, and I got on the ballot, surprisingly. I thought they were going to kick me out of the municipal building. So that was fun. So I had some campaign parties and whatnot, and eye-opening experience, because you're not going to go into the grocery store for garlic, say, or goulash, and think you're going to get out of there real quick, because you're going to have to talk to people because they want to know what's on your mind. So, of course, I didn't win, but I did get 1,700 votes, and I got on a first-name basis with all Kenosha politicians, And I always have great conversations with John and Arabian when we meet. I never really even knew him back when, I hardly even knew anything about any of that when I started. And, you know, and then got to know, you know, all the Kenosha aldermen. They should all become horror hosts because they are a colorful bunch of people, I tell you.
Okay. Have you ever met any? Did you attend any conventions, or do you meet any other celebrities?
Oh, I've done tons of conventions and met all kinds of celebrities. Sid Haig, the famous serial killer clown from the Rob Zombie movies. Actually, he was in all kinds of movies, even Diamonds Are Forever with Sean Connery and the James Bond film. Just the nicest guy in the world. Wouldn't charge for autographs. I always had conversations with him, and he'd tell me what it was like working with Lon Chaney Jr. and Spider Baby, and you know, he had an immense background, and Rob Zombie kind of really put him out there and made him well known, you know. And that's what's cool about Rob Zombie. He uses really cool actors that have merit and then puts them in his wild films. Very cool.
Hey, do you have any, you know, anecdotal stories or interesting experiences in your life?
Well, I've had plenty of interesting experiences, that's for sure. Police escorts out of Oshkosh, you know, but it wasn't really my fault, but that was a thing. That was very early with the bands and the imagery in the 80s of anyone with colored hair and mohawks, you know, scared people. But there was just some incident that happened in a hotel room, and anyway, we left for breakfast and came back, and the place was surrounded. And the officer said, "Are you responsible for bringing these people here?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Okay, get them in your car and get out of town."
Ran out of town.
And they followed us to the border. That was real. I think I was only 19 years old then, and really wasn't I wasn't the one really that was the problem. What some of the group were, you know, bands. But you know, there's a lot of stories like that. I'd be too. You got 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
I could let you in on a bunch of humdingers, I'll tell you what.
I bet. Wow. What about, I mean, in our pre-meeting, we talked about the old theaters in Kenosha. What would be your desire, your vision for the status of our Kenosha Theater, Orpheum Theater?
Well, I'd like to see them all. I'd like to see them all opened up for one thing or another, or just just for tours, you know. Mm-hmm. People always say people win the lottery, okay, and don't know what they're going to do with the money. Well, I'd be like, "Hey, Jeff Boz, we're going to fix that Kenosha Theater. We're going to fix. As a matter of fact, let's just fix. You know, you're one of those. You become you got $900 million in your hand. You know.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's fix all these Kenosha theaters because they're really part of the history of Kenosha, and something should be done. They should be preserved. It was, you know, much more. We live in an age now where everybody's Netflix and chill. And, you know, people aren't interacting. And the theater was a place that you would go. There'd be 2 movies. You'd talk about the movie at, you know, intermissions and whatnot. And there was cartoons. And people spent the time there off the cell phones, off the, you know, get out of the house, interact. I'll tell you one thing. I don't believe if they would have tried that lockdown stuff in 1980 like they did for 2020, I don't know if it would have been as easy for them. But you know why? Because everybody's already locked down on their computers, staying at home, buying everything on Amazon, you know, not socializing. That's kind of scary and dangerous, and I don't know what the future is going to lie. Again, I would be wonderful to know what someone that might be watching this 30, 40, 100 years from now, if we've advanced past some of this negativity.
Could be. Anything else you would like to talk about? Your career?
Well, I don't know if it's a career. It's just been a fun life.
Yeah, good.
You know, doing the haunted thing in October is great. Being the scary guy in town, doing the late night films. You know, having the art show, the Dorian Gray art show, and you know, doing the artists and playing in the band. I mean, that's just it was a destiny. It's what I when I was a teenager, I was like, this is what I have to do. Mm-hmm. Nothing else matters.
Okay. All right then, and thank you. And on behalf of the Kenosha History Center and Kenosha Community Media, thank you for participating in the Kenosha Voices program.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thanks.